Welcome to Growing Through Tragedy, experiencing life's challenges from an empowered perspective. This is Leon Morton. Between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. That quote by Viktor Frankl, the Austrian neurologist and psychiatrist Holocaust survivor. Today on this Belief Hack Brainery podcast, we're going to share an incredible conversation with you with an amazing man. And I just want to set the frame before we introduce him and get into the podcast. First off, we're distancing, social distancing, as we are in the midst of this COVID-19 lockdown. So the actual recording of the podcast is going to have a little bit of variance in the audio. Just please forgive that. It does not affect the content or the coolness of this conversation and discussion, but just wanted to address that. And I want to set the tone. This man that we're going to be interviewing is a friend of mine, and he ended up being drafted in the NFL back in 1989 as the number 2 overall draft pick, and that was as an offensive lineman. And he shares a story of basically crashing and burning and then redemption, and the power of that journey for him in life. And it is a story of growing through a tragedy. And so here's the first thing you got to think about. The guy that was drafted before him that year was Hall of Famer Troy Aikman. The very second pick was this friend of mine. The next guy after him was the amazing Barry Sanders, arguably the best running back of all time. Also Hall of Fame. The guy after him was Derek Thomas, Hall of Fame linebacker on defensive end. And then the following guy after him, so the first 5, was the incredible Deion Sanders, also Hall of Fame player. So this guy stood as a mountain to draft at the second position in that year's draft as an offensive lineman. I don't think it had ever been done in that time before. But here's the takeaways to listen for today as we share Tony's story with you. One of the first belief hack takeaways is authentic humility and transparency, and how imperative that is for our personal growth, development, and overall psyche and well-being. So listen for that. The next takeaway I found in this conversation was an innate skill or mindset that enjoying the journey is the goal. The end game outcome is good and to be acknowledged, though the moment-to-moment awareness, joy, passion, sweat, and tears are where the living is at. Takeaway 3 for the Belief Hack takeaway 3 from this interview and conversation is at 11 years old, this guy decided and made a decision, which actually means, if you break those 2 words down, de-incision, it means to cut off. He made a decision, and then, which is just astounding as an 11-year-old, he wrote it down. And one of the best quotes out of the interview, "If I don't have a plan, I'll get there fast," which is nowhere. The next takeaway, with that commitment and that decision, he then committed to himself that from that point forward, he would calibrate all of his activities and basically ask himself a question, whether it was a major decision or a small minor detail. And that question was, is this getting me closer to my goal? And then he would act accordingly. The next belief hack takeaway to listen for is sacrifice. And he discusses how that sacrifice needs to be looked at not only from you, but also for those that you love around you that your commitment is going to affect. The next belief hack takeaway is taking ownership, stepping above being the victim, and through internal contemplation, taking a personal inventory, assessing and then calibrating the results that you're getting. And if they're not congruent with your compelling vision, then you need to change your actions and beliefs to move towards that desire. We already discussed authentic and vulnerable, but he says something that's really powerful when he's discussing this about his now clients that he works with. And he says, when we are authentic and vulnerable, that's when the best view of us comes out. And then the last tidbit from this Belief Hack podcast is leadership reflects the group, whether it's an organization or even when it comes to a country and or a culture. So with that, we're going to get right into the podcast, and I am so pleased to have my friend on the show, and I give you Tony Mandarich. Welcome to the Belief Hack Brainery and Growing Through Tragedy podcast. I am so pleased and excited to welcome a man that now has become a friend and who I used to look up to and idolize, even though we would have been technically close to the same age. I think I got him by a couple of months technically, but we're in the same year and we were in the same town and didn't even know it. I actually bumped into this character, and he was a character, numerous times at the gym in East Lansing, Michigan. And this is when the great Tony Mandarich was literally the highest sought out offensive lineman in the country, and some think probably one of the best offensive linemen at the collegiate level ever. And Tony moved on and moved into the NFL, and we're going to share some of his story of struggle and challenge and overcoming and belief and how his mind worked through the process of becoming who Tony was then and also who he has become now. And welcome, Tony Mandarich.
Jay, thanks for having me, buddy. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm so excited to see you and also hear from you. And it's funny, Tony. I know we've spoke, but back when I played ball at a little school outside of Lansing, Michigan called Olivet College. Mm-hmm. I remember running into you at the Powerhouse Gym in East Lansing, where old Bill used to own that place, and watching you come in with your bandanas and troop of a couple guys and just taking ownership of that place. It was pretty amazing. I'm pleased to have you on the show, and hopefully we're going to be able to share some really empowering things with our listeners about what your journey looked like and how you have come to be where you are and overcome. And with that, I'll just start with the first question. You were that guy, like on the cover of Sports Illustrated. And so at a time in your life when all that was going on, one thing that we like to talk about on this podcast is what our beliefs and our perceptions do at every stage of our journey in regards to how holding on to those beliefs creates for us what we really feel our reality is. And so there you are, you're going to be potentially the number 1 draft pick, ended up being number 2, I believe. Mm-hmm. The number 2 draft pick overall as a lineman. I think that was unheard of at the time. And can you just share with us what that mental journey looked like to get to that place and then to go to the Packers and be there for 4 seasons and then you're out? Like, what did that journey look like?
You ever see a roller coaster?
Yeah. See the point?
That's what it looked like. And that's almost not even metaphorically. That's literally what it looked like. So, one of the things I found out about myself throughout this journey, even, up to this day, it gets confirmed to me even up till today. But back then, I enjoy the process much more than the destination. I enjoy the process of getting there like 10 times more than the actual end game. I stop and I appreciate the end game and I acknowledge it. And then I'm like, what's next? Like, what's next on the plate? What's next? What do I want to do next? So, going way back, and I'll run through it extremely quickly, is at 11 years old, I'm in Canada, and I'm like, I made a decision at 11 that I was going to play in the NFL. And I knew that there were, obviously there were steps to take. You had to have a plan. So I literally grabbed a pencil and a piece of paper and started writing stuff down, like working out, running, all this stuff. But, at 11, I was also smart enough to know that I was still growing. So it's not like I should be bench pressing and stuff. But you can still do chin-ups, push-ups, sure, all the plyometric stuff, and play sports like soccer and all these other things. So I always asked myself the question from 11 on, and this is like more with medium to major things in my life, was, is this thing over here going to help me and propel me to get to my end game of the NFL, or is this going to become, or is this already a distraction? So I got very, even at a young age, tunnel visioned and very focused. It's almost like having like a racehorse having the blinders on, right? It's like, do what's in front of you and have a plan.
That's frankly incredible. At 11, to be that cognizant of understanding how you needed to hone your focus, right? Because hone your focus and attention, that's pretty phenomenal. Did that come from your parents, or where did you
I think it did. I think it really did. Where, the act of putting it on paper came from, I probably school. I have no idea. Like, because it wasn't like they did that, but they were immigrants from, former Yugoslavia, which was communist.
right?
So, you hear stories like running from, like air raid sirens going on during World War II because the Allied forces are coming to bomb Yugoslavia because they're communist and partnered with Hitler.
Right.
Right. And my mom and dad were like trying to escape out of communism so they have a better life for themselves and for their kids and their family.
Wow.
So I think that all of that comes from hearing all those stories. When your mom tells you, think about this, a third grade girl, your mom comes into class, pulls you out of class, and gives you a wooden staff to go up into the mountains and take care of the sheep to keep the wolves away from them. And you're like, yeah, okay, it's business as usual.
Wow.
Can you imagine doing that today to a third grader, a girl, third grader? It was different times. So we have to take that into consideration.
Sure.
It was different times, but those stories are the roots. Those stories are the foundation. And those stories are, like, to me, like the legacy. I think just sharing those stories carries that legacy of me carrying the legacy of my mom and my dad and what they did, what they've gone through. Now, that I used to think was an uncommon story. That's a common story. There's a lot of immigrants that have done this. And now it's a lot more from the Asian countries and certain areas of the world, but back then it was more Europe.
Right.
Okay. So it's just different times, but I think all that focus and all that stuff and all those stories I heard were like, yeah, if you want something, you really need to, get a plan, write it, I was kind of like, write it down so I know where I'm going. Because if I don't have a plan, I'll get there fast. Nowhere, right?
You'll get nowhere. Yeah. Exactly.
I'll get nowhere fast.
Yeah.
I just kind of wrote a plan, and that plan constantly changed because sometimes things evolved quicker, sometimes not as quickly. So you had to adjust what was going on. And then if it wasn't working, why wasn't it working?
Right.
So, I mean, I was already gathering analytics, right? Like, why is it not working? What am I doing wrong?
That's incredible. I mean, and yeah, you said it's something very key. It's just business as usual. I think that's way different for today. You look at some of the ways I think about when my kids were growing up and the things I tried to instill in them. It's a rare breed that recognizes, especially at a young age like you were, that recognizes this is what I'm doing. And now this is the process I have to take to go there.
And there's a lot of sacrifice that comes with that. A lot of sacrifice and sacrifice in relationships, whether it's with friends, whether it's family, whether it's whatever. Everybody has their own experience. For me, one of my biggest flaws, I would say, even, I've been sober now 25 years. One of my biggest flaws, and I don't do it anymore, is I expected out of my kids what I expected out of myself. To put those kind of expectations and demands on somebody, especially if they're girls. And I didn't like literally come out and say those things like that, like I just said them to you, but I acted that way. And I was like, well, look, if you want to be the best, you have to sacrifice these things. Like, you have to do these things and sacrifice time. But if you really want to do it, are you really sacrificing because you're doing what you love?
That's a great question.
And that really has hurt my relationship with my
That,
girl.
that's very interesting.
Yeah.
The perception that they would receive from you based on those expectations,
Yeah.
even if they're unsaid,
Yes.
they pick up on that.
And they're very, intuitive, and they're very smart, and they can feel just like anybody tension in a room, or,
Sure.
and I never, and this is coming from me, and I'm telling you, I never forced them into anything as far as like sport, or if you want to play sports, do it. I'll support you. If you want to, do career something else, like I don't care what it is, medical, doesn't matter what it is, do it. I'll support you all the way. I'll do whatever I can with the knowledge I have with whatever you're doing, and I may have none.
Right.
But I may have access to tutors or mentors for you. But at the end of the day, the fundamentals are the same. I would just lose track of time, and that's how I knew I was doing what I was supposed to do. I would lose track of time in the process of doing stuff, and be like, I just realized, I spent 4 hours, on the field doing drills. Now that wasn't 4 hours of every minute doing drills. There'd be breaks and stuff, but it'd be like, okay, how long have we been here? An hour and a half? And you look, and it's like, no, it's like 4 hours. And this is like, you're like 14 years old.
That's absolutely incredible. So innately, you were able to build the skill set based on. So in performance psychology, we call that flow, right? And when you're in flow,
Yeah.
you're literally almost like you're not in the real realm of time.
Yeah. Yeah.
I talk about it in spaces where I'm on the stage playing music, and if I'm on a stage and a group of people is very engaged in what I'm doing, I can easily get into my music.
Mm-hmm.
And I never think about my bills. Like I don't think about my struggles. I'm not thinking about my trouble in that time frame. It's a mindfulness approach almost. It's totally consumed in what it is that you're focused on.
Yeah. If I'm going to do something that I love doing and take the risk and take all this time to do it, wouldn't the question I would ask myself is, wouldn't you want to be the best?
Yeah.
Like, or would you want to wake up and say, I want to be second best?
Yeah.
Or I just want to be average?
I did okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's like, and you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. It's just not, it's wrong for me. Like, I can't live with myself thinking that way. And I don't care if people call it that's the way you're wired. People can call it you're obsessed. Yeah. I think you have to be obsessed to a certain degree, to have, to achieve or to be something extraordinary. I think you have to be excessive in something. The thing you got to look for, and it's a red flag, is it doesn't make your life unmanageable. And that's where now at 53, I kind of recognized a lot of things that were detriments, even in sobriety, like, the expectations of my kids. And, my motivation and everything was in the right place. And it was in their best interest. It was to support them in any way I can.
Sure.
But it didn't come across that way. It's very interesting to hear the same story from a different set of eyes, or hear from, different set of ears. It's because I'm like, are we talking about the same story?
Right. That's like relationship in general.
I don't think I was there, right? And it's like,
No.
and that's kind of like where I kind of then get mad at myself for letting myself go to a gray area.
Yeah, or not having the awareness, right? Because of your intention and your specific laser focus, it's so easy to miss
Right.
what the other person might be perceiving out of that interaction.
Right.
Well, it's funny. So you touch on something that's key there, and you're talking about passion and getting into flow and the drive of doing it. But you said that for you, the journey was far more than the end result. Now I have to believe being a finalist for the Outland Trophy, that is the pinnacle for a lineman. That's like the Heisman, right? I mean, that is the shit.
Yeah.
For a lineman in the NCAA at the highest level, Division I football, that's it.
Yes.
if I'm hearing you correctly, then you enjoyed the idea of what you created in your plan. You enjoyed the process of that plan even more so than getting to the potential of winning that award. You didn't, I don't know that it was ultimately you won that award, but as a top three finalist, that would be like in most people's game, I'm there.
Right.
And if I'm hearing you correctly, for you, it's more like I wanted to get here.
Right.
Like the getting there was the
It's a benchmark.
interesting.
It's for, and I finished second in it. Tracy Rocker from Auburn won it as a defensive tackle, great defensive tackle. I think he played 1 year, maybe 2 years in the league. I was a second player taken in the draft. He was the 176th player taken in the draft.
Wow.
Not that I'm saying that there's political things involved in voting, but let's call a spade also.
Sure.
I would definitely have to say that there was some tarnishing of steroid rumors that didn't help my voting.
Yeah, and I was wanting to touch on that if you're open to do that. I know that that was a big thing, and I remember as I was watching it all play out and being in the gym and watching you, you're just a animal in the gym. I'm like, and and I think anybody at this stage recognizes you just don't get that big unless you're doing some kind of
Right.
supplementation. It's just
Right.
impossible.
Like,
And working your
crazy.
ass off and eating
Yeah.
nonstop and all of the things that it takes, right? So that I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to ask you. That was probably that wasn't that like the beginning of a downslide for you?
The Outland Trophy or
The steroid accusations and all of this
for
that
5
affect
years.
you when your first 4 years with the Packers. I mean, what was the deal there?
The steroids, there are the steroid, like everybody knows. I shouldn't say everybody knows. There are people that know, and then there are people, the majority, that assume, and they do assume correctly on a lot of things, that if you take steroids, you're going to get bigger if you work out. It's true. Okay. But boy, do you have to work out,
Right.
and you have to eat right, and you have to get sleep, and you have to do all these things. Now,
Not a magic pill.
no, it's not a magic bullet, right? It's not the, it's a spoke in the wheel that I chose to do that the rules said don't do,
Right.
right? So again, I'll call a spade a spade. I broke the rules. And I knew I was breaking the rules, but I wanted to be the best. And I was like, this is one of the spokes in the wheel. And I had that reckless abandon of I really don't give an F. It's like if I'm gonna make a mistake, I'm going to do it at full speed.
It's like the athletes that want to get the gold medal and they're like, I don't give a shit what it takes. I'm getting the gold medal, period.
Right.
So let me ask you this then. So then you get to the league and you're drafted to the Packers. Go Pack.
Right. That's right.
I've been a converted cheesehead, even though I used to work with the Lions.
Right.
I find that to be really like almost blasphemous, if you
right.
will. But you can't not go to a Packers game at Lambeau and not walk out of there being a fan. I mean,
right.
the culture of the Packers is phenomenal.
Iconic.
So you get to, iconic. You get to the Packers, and did they start testing you more than anybody else right out of the gate, or what
No,
was there
did.
anything where that laid off, and do you think that affected the short run? I mean, 4 years in the league is not a short run. I mean, that's awesome to be there for 1 year, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. I knew steroids well enough. I knew what they did. I knew what they didn't do. I knew I'd been on them and then I'd been off them many times over that 5-year period. And I'm talking like on for 12 weeks, off for 12 weeks, or on for 16, off for 16, which is 4 months, right?
Wow, yeah.
So, so you get to learn a lot. What gets out of your system quicker in case you get drug tested, all these things. I mean, it was just self-education. And, I had a guy that really knew his stuff as far as the chemicals go. And, just picked his brain and used it for like kind of information and guidance. And, his theory was, which I believe was the correct theory because it's what's being done today, is real small doses with multiple steroids or multiple of the steroids, but really small doses.
Interesting.
Where I was like, before I had known this guy, I was like, 1 or 2 different steroids and just a lot of it.
And just load it up. Yeah.
Because more is better, right?
Right. Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
Not at a biological, cellular level,
Yeah.
for sure, right?
So, I cheated on a couple drug tests in college at bowl games, but their testing methods were like kindergarten.
Yeah.
I mean, they were so like elementary.
I think
Knowing going into the NFL that they were much more sophisticated with blood work and urine. So I just kind of, and there was already the rumors and the stigma of that use. So I was like, I'm just going to get off of them and stay off of them. And I knew that I would probably go down anywhere from 10 to 20% in strength.
What about your size? Did you drop a lot of size?
Well, I ended up dropping a lot of size, but for a different reason. But that was part of it, because I had gone on the steroids and off the steroids over 5 years. So I would lose about 10 to 20% because you still work out hard when you're not taking them.
Sure.
The thing that got me was when I was like, I'm done with the steroids, I immediately, and this is what separates someone who's a hard drinker or a hard drug user from a addict. Because I know a lot of people that drink hard and party hard, but they're not alcoholics, and I know people that drink socially that are not alcoholics, but an alcoholic can't stop. Right? You just can't stop. It's like you're always obsessing about it. Same with the drug addiction, same with the pill, whether you're shooting, whether you're swallowing a pill, whether you're snorting something, doesn't matter what it is. If you're obsessing over it, you're an addict. Yeah. That's just the way it is. And I immediately replaced steroids with painkillers, knowing that painkillers aren't going to get me stronger, but I just like the euphoric feeling of the opiate, right? And everybody was kind of like, oh my God, look at, he's shrinking from the steroids and he's not taking them anymore. And that was about 10%, 15, 20% true. But if you're benching almost 600 pounds and you lose 10% or 15%, you're still pretty strong.
Yeah, you're still a beast,
right? So you're still, you're still gonna be able to play. And I was, and I had replaced it almost in a 24-hour period with painkillers, and I started drinking because of the fear of it all. The fear of it, and that's where the psychological effect of steroids are 10 times stronger than the physical effect. And you know how good the physical effect is. The psychological effect is 10 times stronger, to your advantage or to your detriment.
Or your disadvantage, yes.
Yeah.
I've seen guys come off cycles and then get into this place of, well, I just lost 10 pounds. Yeah, but you had gained 10. You gained 20, so you lost 10. You're still in a gain position, but psychologically they're like backwards, and it's
right.
That's an interesting thing.
Yeah.
So you actually, drugs became the issue for you?
Yes.
Wow.
Drugs and alcohol. Yeah. Drugs. It was mainly though prescription painkillers or anything that was, more on the mind altering side of prescriptions. Like I was much more on the chill out side than the speed side, which is funny because that was the total opposite of me in college, right?
Yeah, and ultimately that would be the opposite of what people would assume if you're in the league, because you got to be go time all the time, right? So
exactly. And they were all focused on the steroids. They were like, he's getting small, and they had no, and I was like, that's fine, let them focus on the steroids and all these allegations, because that takes the attention off of all of these different pharmacies I'm going to.
Well, there's a guy in the league right now that did actually really well this last year for the Raiders, and he's come out with his substance abuse issues. Waller.
Yes, Darren.
He's done a hell of a job. And so you've hit tragedy then on a couple of levels, it sounds like, right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
I believe if you haven't, you're living a sheltered life.
You're not living, yes. And I believe that too.
We're not taking chances.
Life happens, and if you're not out there living, then yes.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this question. This will lead us right into the second question then. So if you could jump in a DeLorean and travel time and go back to that 18-year-old Tony, knowing that you are all about the journey was more satisfactory to you than potentially the outcome, whether good or bad.
Right.
What would you tell that guy?
Oh man, that's well, I mean, I would tell him something he didn't know for sure, that he had no idea of, and that was that there are going to be some hard lessons to learn, and there's going to be some difficulties to overcome. But I was like, but nothing to what at that time I would have even considered insurmountable things to overcome. I think maybe I would have even then said, if that's what I got to go through, then I'm not going to do it.
Really?
Maybe. I would have contemplated. I think just the fact that I would have contemplated it gives me an answer.
So you would basically, in that scenario, you're saying there's going to be things you're going to learn, but there's always things you're going to learn anyways, right? In life. So nothing specific. You wouldn't, nothing specific that you would say, hey, maybe pay attention to this.
Well, I did pay attention to all the details. Yeah. And it's such a subtle, cunning thing, and it creeps up on you if you're not careful. And it comes down to what's the motivation behind it, right? So I felt my motivation when I did the steroids, my motivation was to become the best football player that I could possibly be. And then along with that came, and I didn't say this out very often, like I hardly ever said this to the media or to people, was I want to be the best football player in the country. My roommate knew, but I wouldn't say that to the media. So when Sports Illustrated put that on the cover, that was their saying.
Interesting.
So that wasn't mine. But then one of my steps off the cliff was when they put that on SI, I started to believe it.
Your hubris started to kick in.
All in caps.
All in caps. Wow. So now, so that's an influenced hubris. That I had that experience, nothing like yours, but I remember when I started.
It's probably exactly like mine. It's just a different circumstance.
Yeah, different environment, different situation. I remember when I had started these chain of stores, I was the first guy to do the $1 a minute chair massage. And back when that idea hit the scene, come to find out there was another cat out of Chicago who also started a company. Mine was Stress Busters of America. His was Great American Back Rub. And it was funny how we both simultaneously started this idea. Next thing you know, I'm in all the malls down in Detroit, and I get my contract to work with the Lions, and I do all these things. And now I've got this company with 40 employees, all massage therapists who are definitely interesting in their thinking processes.
Yes.
So, like herding cats legitimately. Right. And on TV, and wow, look at this cool concept. And I bought into the bullshit too. I mean, the hubris kind of takes you over, and then to your detriment, because you see where your ego and pride just gets in the way. And
right. And that experience that you just described, is that feeling that you had, and then that downfall that you had, and the feeling of shame, remorse, guilt, all that shit, is no different. It's the exact same feeling I had. It's just different circumstance. So it doesn't make mine bigger or grander. It's just that mine happened to be one of those things. Yeah, that's it. That's the only difference. That's why it's like, your pain was no lesser than mine. It was no greater than mine, but it was the same shitty pain.
And it can be for everybody that allows hubris to get in the way.
Everybody qualifies.
Yeah, everybody's in the same boat.
It doesn't discriminate.
That's so good. So you got clean, and then you decided to give it another run, right?
Yes.
So
yes.
You went back into the league and got back in with the Colts. What was the process? What was the key factor for you to make another run at it?
Well, March 23rd, 1995, I walked into a treatment center in Detroit, in Brighton, Michigan, which is right by Detroit.
Yep.
I was just so sick and tired of myself. I'd had it up to here with me. I'd already been out of the league for 3 years from the Packers, and got sober in the treatment center, and had no idea that there would be a maintenance program, like a 12-step program to follow. Like I was so naive. I was like, I'm going to come here, get my stuff straightened out, like, and then just not do it anymore. And they're like, that's good, but there has to be a maintenance program, like on staying sober. And it was overwhelming. And I was like, well, I have to do this the rest of my life. And they're like, no, you just got to do it one day at a time.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And I started laughing.
That's awesome.
I started laughing, and I can tell you, honestly, Jay, I've been laughing ever since.
Amazing. That's great.
Isn't that funny?
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. And when I left the tree, I was only in 17 days, and I had no intention of going back to play. I felt that, I was like 245, 250, maybe 255 I weighed. And I was,
About 325.
yeah. And that was, I mean, heck, I would get down to 295, 300 off steroids. So those other 50 pounds are a matter of doing nothing but drugs and drinking and being a sloth and living a drug induced lifestyle. So I was beat up emotionally, spiritually, physically, chemically, all these different ways. And when I went out of the treatment center, I had no intentions of going back to play. I did not resent football, but it really opened my eyes to all the wrongs that I had done with football. And not just with football, but with family, with a lot of things. But it was like not just football, but the employer, the fans, the media, all these people I was blaming. Now once my eyes cleared up, I was like, holy smokes, I was the common denominator. That's the problem. So I was like just happy to be sober, because I thought that was impossible. And then I started working out again, because I just love working out. And with 6 months, being sober for 6 months, I was back up to 300 pounds.
Naturally?
Yeah.
Wow.
Never taken a steroid since.
Wow. That's great.
And so I was having a hard time wrapping my head around it, because I was getting stronger. Wasn't nearly as strong as I used to be, but I was still young. I was only 28. But then I thought to myself, I knew it was impossible to get sober, and the miracle happened. So then I knew if that could happen, anything can happen. It's just a matter of, for me, it was a matter of put it on paper, execute it, and do the steps necessary that you got to do to get there. Just like I did when I was 11. And,
and this was after 4 years out of the league?
I was out of the league 3 full seasons.
That's amazing. Wow.
Yeah. I got my last season was 92, and my first season with Indy was 96. And so I as I got the 6 months of sobriety and started getting bigger and stronger again, and then more importantly, the inner growth of realization of the wreckage you had created, I was like, how do I make things right with that part of my life? And it's like, some things you just can't. They're just impossible. You just can't make them right. You did such a wrong, you can't make it right. But a lot of things you can make right. And so I thought, I'm going to keep working out another 3-4 months, see where I'm at about 10 months of sobriety. If I keep getting stronger and bigger and everything, and, no steroids, no nothing. I may try, to see if somebody will give me a workout. But I was like, bad chance, even because, I'd burned them all.
Unlikely, right? Wow.
And so I ended up getting a workout with Philadelphia. They had a scout flying through Cleveland with a 6-hour layover. And they said that they would give me a workout at a local, I think it was a local Christian community college in like the suburbs of Cleveland. And it was because it was like February, end of January, February. So this scout for Philly, because the head coach at Philly at that time was Ray Rhodes. Now Ray Rhodes was one of the coaches at Green Bay under Holmgren.
Nice.
And that was like my last year there. So I knew him. So he knew of me. And then he was like, well, it's not costing us anything because we have a scout flying from the West Coast back home. He's got a 6-hour layover. We'll give him a workout at this gymnasium. It was literally a basketball court.
Wow.
So I did the workout. There was no 40-yard dash. There was just no room. But I did all these offensive line drills. And then I did the weight stuff, the bench press test. And the scout was like, where have you been? Like, this is like, he's like you just disappeared and now like you just had a great workout.
Wow.
So he, within hours, so I drove back up to Traverse City where I was living. It was like 7-8 hour drive. So there I was. Okay, so it was 1996, early 1996. It was merely a 7 years earlier, I was calling my own shots at the draft.
Right.
I was having my own workouts at Michigan State where like everybody had to come.
We're coming to you.
Right. And there I was, and I was laughing at myself driving 8 hours in the middle of winter down to Cleveland of all places, because that's where the layover was. Wow. And I was grateful that they even said that they would look at me. That's awesome. So word spreads pretty quick, right? So Ray Rhodes tells this guy like hours later, we want to fly him into Philly next week, and I want to see him. I want to work him out. So I'm like, holy smokes, like this is cool. Like, because I drove down on my own dime.
Right.
And I was fine. And I was fine with it. I was totally. And then I thought to myself, okay, now they're paying for a flight and they're, well, Indy, obviously it's a small network. Indianapolis hears that I have a good workout. Indy gets on the phone and says, we'd like to work you out also. And I said, okay, well, Philly's working me out next week. When do you want to do it? And they're like, well, we want you to fly out tomorrow morning.
They wanted to get you before them.
Or yeah, and and who knows? Like they probably were like, we're taking a chance. If we see something we like, let's get in front of Philly and do it.
No doubt.
And I went down there the next day and had a great workout, and they offered me a contract on the spot.
That's awesome, dude.
And I was 11 months sober. It was.
Congratulations on that.
It was a direct result. A direct result of sobriety, definitely.
And mindset, belief, right? Yeah. Like you took ownership of your faults. Like you got. It sounds to me like during that time frame, you really went inside, like contemplatively. You went inside and took ownership. The intent of going inside was, I need to look at this from a different perspective.
Yeah.
I'm no longer the victim here.
Right.
What is it that I did here? What is my ownership in this situation? I think that's so empowering. And
yeah. What role did I play?
I don't think anybody can move forward in any given situation, tragic or not, until they're going to literally get real and vulnerable with themselves, right?
I totally agree. And I ask myself that question today. What role did I play in this tension over here, or this adversity over here in my life, or whatever it is? And there's a lot of days that go by great where there's nothing wrong, but it's like, what role did I play? I always have to look at, and then what was my motive?
Yep.
Did I have an ulterior motive, or was I transparent?
Yeah. Was I trying to manipulate, or was I inauthentic?
Exactly.
It's so good. And not manipulate other people, but manipulate yourself.
Self-sabotage, right?
Right. So good. Well, that's perfect. And, it sounds like in that space, you were in the way that you were when they told you at sobriety, I got to do this the rest of my life. No, you got to just do it every day.
One day at a time.
And you're taking that same concept of let me analyze myself at the end of the day.
Yeah.
How was I today? Was I my best me today? It's in football, as you know, at the highest level, it's all about reps, right?
Yeah.
It's all about reps. Did you take did you take your best reps today? Right.
If I leave stuff on the plate, metaphorically, Like if I leave gas in the tank after practice,
Right.
can't live with myself.
Yeah, that wasn't the best reps.
No.
Right? Wasn't the best representation of yourself and or repetitions.
And then you start to question, am I stealing?
Oh, wow.
Right? Am I stealing? Am I giving this employer everything I got?
I like that too.
You know, because, and that's calling a spade now.
Right.
And that's not sugarcoating. That's not being like, hey, your hand's in the till. No, it's being like, no, but you are stealing because you're not really giving your best effort.
Right. You didn't give it all.
You're not doing your job, what you're being here paid to do. And I question now I'm self-employed now, right? So entrepreneur, whatever you want to call it. So who are you accountable to then? It's harder. In a way, it's harder. And a lot of times myself and the discussion I have between the 8 inches between my 2 ears is sometimes a bad neighborhood.
Sure.
And sometimes it's like, yeah, you gave it your best, and in your soul knows you didn't.
We all know.
Yeah.
I just call that extreme vulnerability. And until a man gets vulnerable, man or woman, seems to me difficult more for men.
Yes.
And I shared this with my brother the other day. We're having a conversation about some stuff. He's really trying to be contemplative about some changes in his world. And I just said, much until you get authentically vulnerable, no matter what that picture is going to look like, you have to be okay to look at that picture.
Yeah.
You can't move forward. You can't make the changes, right? Habits are going to kick in and instantly you're back in habit and reactive mode as opposed to response mode.
It's, the eyes becoming very leaky is almost necessary.
Without a doubt. Yeah. I did it the other day on a little meditation. I did a live Facebook meditation, metta, just offering gratitude and love and kindness and peace and hope for those that are struggling right now. And in it, I got like all choked up, and I have guys go, "Oh, there Jay goes crying again," but I get moved by intention, right? I get moved by authenticity, and I just think that that's so powerful.
I agree, and I think just, and it's nothing again, like there's nothing wrong with those people that say that, like, oh, there goes Jay. Some people are just more like, I'm more like you. If I say I'm all in, I don't have like my toe still out the door. I'm all in, like I'm all in. And if I'm all in, everything matters. Everything matters. And it's literally, that's not a metaphor. It's like everything matters. If I'm all in, because if I'm not all in, then literally I'm all out.
Right.
Because you're not in, right? So
you can't be.
You can't be both.
Yep.
And both is a great recipe for self-sabotage.
Yeah, you step in the river or you're not in the river.
Yeah, exactly.
Simple, right?
Yep, exactly.
Well, that takes me to our next question. And this is one in our world right now. We've got this incredible challenge going on with the COVID-19 and the social distancing and the people with the chaos and the fear and what have you, right? If this new Tony, the contemplative Tony, the one that really is okay with being authentic and vulnerable, if you were to be able to have a big billboard in the sky and you wanted to provide or offer hope or send a message to everybody, what would that billboard say right
now? It probably will surprise you.
I'm ready for a surprise.
I think I would have that billboard say, it's not about you.
Nice.
And have everybody kind of look into their selves and going to the point of, we've heard on the news, some of these young people don't think that, you can be asymptomatic. You can be young, you can be older, be asymptomatic. You can still carry it, but a lot of these people went to spring break still.
Absolutely. Right.
And then you start looking at the heat map of where it's spread the quickest so far. It's been on the East Coast, like right down the whole coast, right? So are they the only fault? No, it's just didn't help it. Right. So because it was all about, this is my last spring break. I'm a senior.
Justifying whatever the reasons are.
Right. And it's like, it ain't about you. You don't get it. And it's a hard thing to understand, especially say at that age, because you couldn't have told me. I mean, I had all the answers, right?
Right.
And then all my answers got me into treatment.
Well, from your perspective, all your answers are shaded. They're filtered anyways.
Right.
I call this in my book, I call this me dumb. We all live in the kingdom of me, right?
Right.
Everything is from that space. And when it is from that space without thoughtfulness towards another's perspective, it's a filter that is pretty scary, right?
Yeah, it is. It is. And, you know, and yeah, we're human. We make mistakes, but, you know, there's a lot of great things going on, like that people are doing, like just phenomenal things. So I mean, we have to acknowledge that. What is sensationalized is all the bad stuff, or the stuff that is not being done, or the deaths, or the Trump administration. It's like, I don't care who's in administration now, they would have their hands full.
Oh, without a doubt.
It doesn't matter who it is.
Yeah.
Okay. So I almost want to like grab my TV sometime. And I never watch the news, but I've watched more news in the last 2 weeks for education purposes,
right,
than I have in probably the last 5 years. Because I just don't watch the news, because all they talk about is bad stuff, and that's all they care about.
It's just, to your point, sensationalizing negative bullshit. So
and it's like, I don't have time. It's like, yeah, some guy shot another guy at 3 a.m. in the morning, and I'm like, well, what do you expect?
Right. Yeah.
You know, downtown Phoenix,
Out at 3 a.m. in the morning.
They're both, you know, drunk or doing a drug deal or something. It's like, well, the chances go higher. It doesn't mean that it happens, but yeah, your elevation of risk is higher at certain times, you know.
After midnight, not much goes on, right?
Exactly.
Not much positive things.
Not much, yeah. My old coach, God rest his soul, who just passed away, George Perlis, taught me some of the best lessons in life. And one of the things he would say to us as a team was, nothing good happens after midnight.
That's right.
He's like, coach, watch the news.
My coach was Dwayne McLaughlin. He coached at Berrien Springs High School, and before I went on to my little college. And Mac used to play under Perlis. Mac was an offensive lineman at MSU.
Okay.
And so we used to hear the similar message. Nothing good goes on after midnight.
Yeah.
It's just all that is trouble waiting to happen.
Yeah.
So
the risk level just goes up so much higher. But I would say, yeah, it's not about, the billboard would say it's not about you. I'm embarrassed for parts of humanity with the hoarding of toilet paper.
Right.
like I'm like embarrassed. Like I'm embarrassed for like people. It's like, you're really fighting over toilet paper instead of being like in a world of what can I do for my neighbor. That's the part, like that's what disappoints me. Like it's a letdown for me. And it's not about Americans, because they're hoarding in Australia. They're hoarding everywhere. And it's kind of like, it's not a shit disease. Right? I'm like, it's shitty that's going around, right? But it's kind of like, I don't get it. It's like I get it, but I don't get it. It's like, wait a second, people. You know, this is probably, you know, it's going to sound weird to say, but it's probably not a bad thing that happened.
Well, I think there's going to be a lot of learning.
Yeah.
If people are paying attention and they get out of their me dumb, there will be a lot of opportunity for growth and learning.
Yes. And self, you know, inventory, self introspection. Look at myself. How am I living? How did I act during a huge time of adversity?
Sure.
You have to ask yourself that question if you care, like if you care about your own, like how you are.
Yeah. And if you want to come out on the other side in a positive way. Right?
Yeah.
That's what growing through tragedy is all about, is you have to look inside first, and you can't be a victim when you're doing it. You said something in one of the ESPN or one of the NFL film interviews I watched from you, and I loved it. You were talking about with your clients now, what is the most, when you try to work with a client as a photographer, because now you do such incredible photography and creative in all kinds of ways with that, you said, I want to know what drives them. And you're talking about the model or the person that you're shooting. And because that helps you make fit for the outcome. And I do in one of our programs, I discuss the power of making fit for the other person's way, because that's when you really have harmony and synergy. What what drives you now? Like, what compels you? Just like you try to learn from them, what's driving them? What is their outcome objective? Where Tony sits today in his journey now, what drives you?
That is, part of that is what you mentioned earlier, hearing people's story. I want to learn from every person, and it doesn't have to necessarily, we got specific with people I photograph. And it is more so with them because I speak with them more.
Sure.
I build rapport with them more. The more rapport I can build with them before the shoot, and I'll try to start weeks before by talking about certain composition ideas and things like that. Because the more they get comfortable and the more they trust me, the more they'll be willing to be themselves and be vulnerable.
To be authentic, yep.
Yes. And then when they're authentic and vulnerable, the best images come out.
It's so good.
And because a lot of times people think that they have to, especially a woman, thinks that she has to, she's watched, something on like one of the channels, like America's Top Model, and like she has to now act a certain, I'm like, no. I said, pretend like you never watched that show. I want you to be you.
Perfect.
If I see something that I will direct you with, it's to make that pose more flattering or more powerful or stoic or whatever we're trying to accomplish, to bring that emotion off of the 1 millisecond of time. But really for me, like carrying the message that, anything is really possible. Really anything is possible. So me carrying that message, now I carry that message very strongly in the sobriety community. That message can be carried with sobriety to the non-sobriety community also, but not shoved down people's throat either. But it's also carrying the message of embrace adversity. That's where your biggest lessons are going to come from.
It's where we grow.
Right. So it's like, instead of, you got to go through it, it sucks, no matter what it is, whether it's this virus or whether it's a relationship, doesn't matter what, a job, doesn't matter what it is, it's going to suck. But I have a choice. I can sit here and crumble, or I can learn from this. And sometimes the lessons come quicker, sometimes the lessons come later. But the lesson is always there, and it's each person's life experience and each person's ability to be able to look back, if they choose to try to find that lesson. That's where they're going to find their lesson.
If they choose to look back.
If they choose to look back. And unfortunately, many don't. I think the more that you look inside yourself, the more you start to see, holy smokes, you talk about baggage. It doesn't matter if you're a woman or a man, or it doesn't matter what color, race, religion, everybody's got stuff. And the thing is like, what am I doing am I trying to improve it? Am I trying to change it?
Yep.
And if you're not trying to change it, that's still okay, but you lose the right to bitch about it. Because there's people that complain, that I know, that complain about stuff every day.
Sure.
To me, about certain stuff in their life, and they're not willing to change certain things so those things don't exist in their life. And I say to them, you lost the right to bitch anymore to me about that. You can go bitch to your other friends, because I'm not going to listen to it.
Right.
Because I just don't have time. Like I like the phrase, and I've used it before a lot, is it's okay to look back, just don't stare.
Nice.
Right? So acknowledge it. It's like, I acknowledge I played football pretty good. I acknowledge I was an epic failure in Green Bay. I acknowledge there was a comeback that was key. That catalyst was huge, because it like reaffirms, or it's the foundation that, for me personally, getting sober and doing a 12-step program, because the 12 steps are, if you take the word alcohol out of the 12 steps and just read them, it's a great guideline. It's an instruction manual on how to live.
Wow. Well, thank you for that, Tony. That your authentic vulnerability is shining through, and I really appreciate you sharing that with us. And yes, it seems that was a turning point in your life, and I highly would recommend that to anybody that has a situation with addiction. And as you said, you're a very visible force in that space. So I highly also recommend anybody to reach out to Tony on his website and on his contact info, which we're going to give you here shortly, and just follow him and his lead, because he's a very strong man and leader, as you can see. Hey, as we're getting ready to wrap up, I know our time is precious here, and I appreciate you joining us today. Just wanted to ask you, any special projects you're on that anybody needs to know about as we get ready to wrap up?
There's a few projects that I'm involved in. Both have to do with veterans, like military veterans.
Nice.
Both from different sides of the country. One's here on the West Coast, one's on the East Coast. I've kind of naturally fallen into that. I've never been in the military, but I've always had a soft spot for military because they're all in.
Yeah.
They're defending democracy. They're defending freedom.
Sure.
They're defending things that we take for granted. They're defending stuff that people don't even know what the military does. They
don't see the value in their everyday existence yet.
Right.
They wouldn't have an everyday existence if it wasn't for these.
Exactly. And that's where, that's funny, because I'm very liberal, but that's where I get very unliberal.
Nice.
I get very conservative with certain things, and I don't consider myself leaning towards one of the parties. I'm like, I want who's gonna propel and lead as a leader this country and these people and us. That's what we want. But you know what? Our leader reflects us.
Yeah, many times, without a doubt.
So there's two military things I'm involved with, both nonprofits, both for the betterment of retired or non-active military, male and female. And then self-assignment wise, I'm always doing self-assignments and projects for photography for myself, just to experiment on stuff. So there are some things I'm doing now that I don't have my studio anymore, my physical building. I didn't renew my lease last year. I want to challenge. There's some projects I've had on the table as far as shooting some pictures and editing them and just showing how cool they can be, and then after, so show them the end game, and then after show them how it was done and how small the space was
in the process of what.
Right. In the process of, they probably have an assumption of that this was done in this big studio, yet it will be done in a 12-foot by 15-foot closet.
That's interesting. Wow, that's cool.
But I want them to see the end game first.
And then go back and
say
created.
Yeah. So nobody has an excuse to say, oh yeah, well, it's like the high-end camera, it's the big lighting, it's the studio, it's what's between here.
It's great.
The creativity. It's just like music, right? It's like, and if you want to get better at something, have more tools in the toolbox so you can learn and learn from different people. I constantly learn from people every single day. Even if it's going down that grocery store aisle, learning and confirming to myself, this is not how I want to act during this.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna, if I see, two women fighting over toilet paper, I'm gonna intervene.
Right.
But I'm not gonna say, or hey, quit hoarding toilet paper. It's not my business, right? It's like, if you feel you need to hoard, I don't know if they have 12 kids. They might have 12 kids. I don't know.
Yeah.
So their parents might be living with them too. I don't know. So I don't know the circumstance. All I know is that I know how to survive, and I will survive. I'm going to be okay. And if I'm not okay, then I don't have the ability to help my neighbor. So I have to take care of me so I have the ability to help people.
Sure.
You know, so a lot of people will look at that as selfish, but that's why, you know, when the decompression happens in the airplane, they say, put the mask on yourself first.
Mask on first. Yep.
So you don't pass out when you're putting it on your kid.
I think we all have to look inside first, right? Yeah. How else can we be a contribution of positive outcomes towards anybody else if we don't start inside first? Yeah. Whether that's relationships, intimate relationships, whether that's contribution in physical activities, whatever the case might be.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's true. It's true. And you know, I fall short in so many areas. You know, like I'm into health and fitness a lot, but when I'm eating chips, I'm like, okay, is this, again, okay, does this propel me towards my goal of health and fitness, or is this a deterrent?
Take me away, right?
Right. So I'm like, well, you know, I might be like, well, it tastes so good, it's a deterrent, but I'm good with it, and I can live with it, and I don't get pulled over for eating chips.
Right. Well, in that scenario too, you're cognitively making choices as opposed to unconsciously reacting towards whatever the case might be.
It's a knee-jerk reaction. Pacify constantly. It's like, no, feel the pain.
Yeah, be in it.
Yeah, be in it, because it's gonna suck, and you know what, now you have perspective.
Like Gruden said this year, I love it. You got to learn to love the misery.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When you're growing, it can be miserable.
Yeah.
But that's only for a short period of time. Where can people find your imagery, or where can people find you online and follow along?
The easiest place would probably be my website. And my website is my name. So it's just TonyMandarich.com, because on my website are all the links to my social media. Okay. If you're looking specifically for social media, the one that I really pretty much only go to, even though everything syndicates from it, is Instagram. And that's just my name again. My handle is Tony Mandarich, all lowercase, all one word, no spaces, no underscores, no nothing. And then, but if I post on Instagram, it'll syndicate to my Facebook pages and my LinkedIn and all that other stuff.
All right, cool, man. Well, I appreciate your time so much. It's been a real learning experience for me, and I garnered some really unique concepts, especially what it would have taken at 11 to be able to just lay that path out and to be determined enough to say, now this is what I'm going to do. That shows internal strength like most people just don't have.
A decision was made, and I don't know where that came. I think it came from my parents.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I appreciate your time, buddy.
I appreciate it, Jay. Thank you for having me.
All right, brother.
All right, man.
Bye-bye.